Hey, this is Amazon Duke coming to you from Wyoming, and today's date is 11/11/2018, and today was just another one of those soap opera days where you go, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. Let's begin with one main fact. We haven't had a president in 50 years. Okay, the last 5 presidents, they were preordained, they were set up, they were, somebody bought the presidency. They were chosen either by New World Order and the elite or whatever. Donald Trump is not owned by these people. I think most of America has woken up to that fact that this is a regular guy, just like you and me, and he has the moral compass, just like you and I. He's not a crook, he's not a thief, he's not a liar, he's not a bought, paid for, blackmailed, financially stuck piece of shit like we had with Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Daddy and Baby Bush. Okay? Anyway, so we had 50 years where the Democrats owned everything. They owned the State Department, NSA, CIA, FBI, DOJ, DOD, Department of Defense, Homeland Security, IRS, Federal Reserve, Supreme Court. And they were chairman of just about every committee or in line to do so. Now, what I found weird, and I'll post all of the video from everything I found. Adam Schiff, okay, Judiciary Intelligence. He has a friend called Igor Pastemok, P-A-S-T-E-M-A-K or N-A-K. He's a Ukraine guns dealer. Yeah. That's who does Adam Schiff's functions for fundraisers. Yeah, no wonder he loves Ukraine. Who else loved Ukraine? John McCain. Senator Warner. At one point, Lindsey Graham. There's a lot of them that love Ukraine. I'd like to know what the deal is with Ukraine, and I think it would be worth anyone's time to investigate. Anyway, so what I did is I went back through a lot of the hearings, not just recently hearings, all the hearings. And I'm going to show you what's going to be in charge of the House. The men and women that will be the ones trying to create bills to basically fuck you over. When in reality, these guys should be in prison. And I'm serious about that. They should be in prison. They shouldn't be in office. That's for damn sure. So anyway, we'll start there. We'll start with Adam Schiff, Maxine Waters, Gerald Nadler, Elijah Cummings. I forgot to put Debbie Pooh in here. Wasserman Schultz. I think you guys all do know, right? Her brother was a federal prosecutor on the Vegas shooting, the Pulse nightclub shooting, Parkland shooting, the death of that black gentleman that went down to Broward County to find out about voter fraud, that just magically ended up dead in the water. He was in charge of what other shooting happened over there in Broward County? That one too. Isn't that weird? We're talking Debbie Wasserman Schultz's brother is in charge of these investigations. What the fuck is he still doing there? Okay? And then the other day we get the people that escaped the Vegas shooting killed in the next shooting? And then a fire sets off in California? Seems to me, and you know, I bring this up all the time lately to friends of mine, and I go, does it seem to you like every time the Democrats have a defeat, a mass shooting happens or some kind of disaster. And they're like, fuck, I thought I was the only one that thought that. No. You're not the only one. There are hundreds, thousands, and millions of us. You go, wait a minute. Democrats lost today. Who's going to die tomorrow? You realize they don't have a problem killing Americans. Look at Benghazi. It was a video. Really? Look at the Iran war. We didn't need to go in there and do shit. All we had to do is sanction their ass. We didn't have to go in there and fight them. Sanction them. Starve them down. Don't give them any money. But Obama wasn't going to see any of that. Would we give them billions of dollars? Oh, but that was money that was theirs in our banks. Fuck you. You're a terrorist organization and a terrorist country. You don't get your money. Fuck you. Okay? Anyway, so my video here is just going to be little bits and clips. They're long, but you need the entire... I hate television and talking heads because they clip a video so far down that you don't know really what's going on. It always works in their favor. This way you get to see the actual hearing, so they can't stop me from that. But some of the newscasts, I'll probably have to clip down. And anyway, watch these guys. These are your leaders in the House. Thanks to Democrat voting? I'm not so sure. After what's going on down in Broward County and out in Arizona and Georgia, I think maybe we need to do voter ID. 50 states. Ask if you're a citizen on the ballot, just like you would do on the census. And let's find out how many illegal voters are happening. I have a feeling there's a lot. In fact, in Stacey Abrams tonight, what was it, 200,000 illegal ballots? Fuck. If it's just, you know, these places like this that are having, can you imagine what's going on in Chicago, New York, Pennsylvania, Boston, Detroit? Come on. John James should have taken Michigan governor's race. But Debbie Stabenow, old bag of bones bitch like Nancy Pelosi, don't these women ever just fucking drop dead? Fuck, they're older than my car. And I have a 1947 truck. They're older than my fucking truck. So, anyway, let's put this video together, and my God, guys, we're going to have to come up with a good ground game because they're blocking us on the internet. They're stopping us from talking. That's why they wanted to stop that, what is it, GoDaddy, and Gab is the other one. We need to break up Facebook and Twitter, just like we had to do Ma Bell to get AT&T and Verizon. Everybody deserves a slice of the pie. We need to break up the teachers' unions and stop giving money to Planned Parenthood. You want to murder babies and sell their parts, do it on your own fucking dime, not mine. And Democrats are going to be after, yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're going to be after our guns again, and they're already after our guns again. NRA is bad. Fuck you. I'm part of NRA, and I love my guns. I love my guns, my country, my husband, my children, and my freedom. Don't like it? TFF. Right. Too fucking bad.
Right. How are the voters of Florida supposed to have confidence in this electoral process, given the fact that Brenda Snipes was found by a judge to have destroyed ballots in the race between Tim Canova and Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Can you explain that? Because I don't really think that you claim to have transparency, but that's not really transparent when you have a woman who destroyed ballots in the past overseeing an election.
We're here on this particular election, and right, I don't think there's been any judge who's found that.
But how are the voters of Florida supposed to have confidence in this process, given that she has destroyed ballots in the past? That is
Look at the fucking smirk on that fucking bitch. I'd smack her upside the fucking head if I was there.
Has already been discussed. It has nothing to do with this election.
She's overseeing an election and she destroyed ballots. Is not relevant to what we're talking about right now.
Let's not talk about what she did. Oh no. You fucking little snatch bag.
Let me run the country, you run CNN,
right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President,
that's enough.
I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I have one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have?
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation? Mr. President.
I'll tell you what,
Trump is definitely a alpha male. When a male starts pacing like that, if he hadn't have been president and restrained, he would have come out behind that podium and kicked the bitch Acosta's ass across that fucking room. At 71 years old, I think he could have pounded the fuck out of Acosta.
CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible. And the way you treat other people are horrible. You shouldn't treat people that way.
This guy's a Democrat pimp.
But we are here. They have my number, my email, and everything else. Dr. Snipes has given me one instruction, and that's to tell them whatever they have, if we have the data. In areas in which we did not have the data, we compiled information to provide to them. Again,
we made up information.
All parties, both Governor Scott as well as any other candidate or side in this electoral process. It's very important that we listen to facts and not fiction. I understand this morning, as we speak now, this afternoon, that there are tweets.
Both their asses need to be fired.
Being loaded, downloading new ballots. That's simply not true.
Well, then what's the fucking video about, you fucking loser?
Yes, those type of things off the premises. So we need to deal with reality. Don't follow everything on social media. I think that's taken a lot of people down a lot of rabbit holes. That's just not factual.
He's lying through his fucking teeth.
There have been allegations of fraud. Those are serious charges to recklessly offer out there. There's no basis for it. To give a claim of fraud without any evidence, I think is
because it was a monopoly. 6 corporations owning 95% of all American media is a monopoly. All he has to do is reverse that, put it back into the hands of 1,500 individual Americans so that you don't have to be on the internet. You could probably have your own television station and your own radio station and do your wonderful broadcasts. Only then can America be informed. All of this information, and one of the reasons I made part 2 of the Garrison tapes was because of the importance of the media. And 6 of the leading researchers into the assassination of John Kennedy, who have seen the film multiple times, you just can't watch it one time. It is so impressive and so powerful and so proves that Jim Garrison solved the case in 1967, but was sabotaged by the government and the media. But it was because Donald Trump talked about the fake media during the original campaign. And 2 years ago, when I was listening to him, I thought, gosh, that sounds like Jim Garrison. So I took out the 3.5 hours of tape, the interview that I did with Mr. Garrison on September 5th, 1981, and looked at it and almost felt like I was listening to Donald Trump. And I thought, I have to tell this story, part 2 of the story. So that's the purpose of the film, which is now a runaway hit on Amazon. It's on iTunes and it's on Vimeo. And I am so delighted to be here to talk about it because that is an open, cold case at the Justice Department, has already been solved by Jim Garrison. Donald Trump is the only president who's been pushing for the Central Intelligence Agency to release the files as mandated by Congress. But the CIA has reneged so far. Now, you know, Sean, as somebody who is really knowledgeable about the deep state, the CIA does not have documents that say, this is how we killed John Kennedy. Everything is in code. The reason they do not want any documents released is because there are 67 boxes of Jim Garrison's material sitting in the archives of the Central Intelligence Agency which name the names, show the money, who received the money, and how it all started.
I really don't know where to go on this. We could pursue this, I suppose, for hours and hours. We've been out here almost an hour tonight. And I have to say, as a layman, I am still quite confused.
That's because you're a fucking moron. And what did we learn earlier? There are 9 people in charge of 6 networks in all of the United States in the year 2018. This one is taken back in, oh God, 1963, November 22nd, in 1968. Johnny Carson, Mr. Big Dick. Everybody loved him.
You are asking us and the American public to believe that a team of 7 gunmen carried this out with precision, firing from various points that day in Dallas, which is a remarkable feat in itself, and have disappeared into thin air with no witnesses who ever saw any other gunmen or getaway vehicles, and a gigantic conspiracy in which nobody seems to have yet proved anything. You ask us to believe that. I find that a much larger fairy tale than to accept the findings of the Warren report.
Let me reply to you by saying, first of all, that these men did not disappear into thin air. A number of them were arrested, and I just showed you pictures of them being arrested. I presume you accept that as a fact. You can see them in the pictures.
No, sir, I don't accept that as a fact.
Well, why the fuck not? What do you need them to do? Shove it up your ass, Johnny Carson? Oh, that's right. You like it up your ass, you fucking queer.
I don't know who those men are, and I don't know for what reason they were arrested, and how can you say that the assassins were arrested and then returned loose? Is this what you're saying?
Some of them were arrested, yes. Now, let me go on.
And then were subsequently turned loose?
They were turned loose later in the afternoon. Now, yes, let me go to the second point.
Because they rolled like fucking fleas, and everybody knew, yes, that's why I continue to say that we have not had a president in 50 years. Back to John F. Kennedy. See what I'm saying? That was the last time we had a president that wasn't bought, paid for, propped up, put together, what do they call it? Oh God, what do they call it? Prepped for it, like it's something you're entitled to. You're entitled to it. Let's go back to this.
The second point is, you point out again the fact that you've seen no evidence and the matter doesn't seem to come to trial. We are pushing for trial, and there's nothing more we can do than try to get the case to trial. Let me sum it up by saying, am I asking the people of America to believe this? I'm doing more than that. I'm trying to tell the people of America that the honor of this country is at stake. And if we don't do something about this fraud, we will not survive. And there is no way to survive if we don't bring out the truth about how our president was killed 4 years ago. And the investigation by the Warren Commission wasn't even close. It was.
They are talking about calling for I'll let them make their own announcement, but to take us to a place where we find out, did a foreign government, and I know that we did, what is the role of a foreign government in undermining our election?
I don't know. Why don't you go ask Hillary Clinton or your chairman of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz? How about Donna Brazile? Nancy Pelosi, we know what's going on, sweetheart. You guys have already been busted.
Okay, where to begin? We could dedicate an entire show to the swampiness of Bob Menendez, but we'll just focus on the lowlights. Menendez sits on a number of powerful Senate committees, including the Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs Committee, the Finance Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, all of which have brought him a huge number of conflict donations. Just this election cycle, he's pocketed $850,000 from the real estate industry and nearly $500,000 from securities and investment companies, all of them buying influence with a senator who explicitly regulates those industries. On top of that, Menendez's chief of staff for 10 years was Michael Hutton, who went on to become a lobbyist for the infamous firm Capital Counsel. While working there, Hutton represented a number of clients, including Beacon Capital Partners, the National Association of Real Estate Investment Trusts, and Oak Tree Capital Management, all of them beneficiaries of Hutton's ties to a member of the Senate Housing and Banking Committee. But the senator's swampy ties to lobbyists go much deeper than former staffers. Just since November 2016, lobbyists and their family members have given Menendez over $200,000 for his re-election campaign. $48,000 of that came from Greenberg Traurig, a firm that has earned over $600,000 lobbying on behalf of the Mexican government, and $400,000 lobbying for Turkey in 2018. How is that relevant? Oh, no big deal. It's just that Menendez is the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. He's also brought in $28,000 from Brownstein Hyatt, which has earned $350,000 this year lobbying for the government of India, and $300,000 for Saudi Arabia. Yes, you heard that right. While the Democrats attack President Trump over his handling of murdered journalist Jamal Khashoggi, their most senior elected official on foreign policy is handling campaign cash from Saudi Arabia's lobbyists. By the way, what the hell is the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, or any member of Congress for that matter, doing, taking any money at all from lobbyists for foreign
Democrats
governments?
talk about this bill often in very apocalyptic terms, but isn't really what's going on is that many people are getting a very modest tax cut and some people are getting a tax increase, while a lot of this is also going to business, but it's not the end of the world?
No, it is the end of the world. This healthcare, the debate on healthcare is life, death. This is Armageddon. This is a very big deal, because you know why? There's really a very hard way to come back from this. They take us further, more deeply into debt. What can you do but raise taxes?
The bill so that you can find out what is in it.
The main point would be Bob Goodlatte, who has done a bill, and I understand you're ready to submit it, and you're going to take that and you'll submit, and they'll negotiate in Congress or the House, and then it goes to the Senate, and they'll negotiate, both Republican and Democrat, but it could be a good way of starting. Now, if anyone has an idea different from that, but I think starting in the House might be good. You're ready? I think you're ready to go.
We are.
I would like to add the words merit into any bill that's submitted, because I think we should have merit-based immigration like they have in Canada, like they have in Australia. So we have people coming in that have a great track record as opposed to what we're doing now, to be honest with you. But I think merit-based should be absolutely added to any bill, even if it has to do with DACA. That would be added to the things I said. I think it would be popular. I think I can tell you the American public very much wants that. But Bob, where are you with the bill?
So tomorrow, Chairman McCall and Congressman McSally and Congressman Labrador, we're the chairman of the two committees and the chairman of the two subcommittees, are going to introduce a bill that addresses the DACA concerns. And let me thank you, Mr. President, both. I was an immigration lawyer before I was elected to Congress. I want to thank you both for campaigning on securing our borders and the interior of our country, but also on addressing DACA in a way that makes sense. Don't do it ad hoc. Do it through the congressional process. So you challenged us, and we should step up to that challenge. And we're going to do it in a bipartisan fashion, but we have to put our best foot forward, and we're going to do that with this legislation. It's going to address DACA in a permanent way, not a temporary short-term thing. We're going to address the border enforcement and security and the wall. We're going to address, in Mr. McCall's bill, we're going to address interior enforcement, but not everything that the administration had on its list. We're going to address chain migration. We're going to end the visa lottery program. We're going to address sanctuary cities and Kate's Law. We think it is a good bill that will both address the two things our speaker told us right after you made your decision, which is we have to address the problem we have with the DACA kids being in limbo, as Dick Durbin described it, and I agree with that. But we also have to make sure this does not happen.
Uphill struggle to keep alive the vital legislation that protects the most fundamental right to vote. A person who has exhibited so much hostility to the enforcement of those laws
The senator is reminded that it is a violation of Rule 19 of the standing rules of the Senate to impute to another senator or senators any conduct or motive unworthy or becoming a senator.
She should have been censured right then and there and removed from the floor. Elizabeth Warren is a vicious, vile, fucking snake.
Mr. President, I don't think I quite understand. I'm reading a letter from Coretta Scott King to the Judiciary Committee from 1986 that was admitted into the record. I'm simply reading what she wrote about what the nomination of Jeff Sessions to be a federal court judgment and what it would mean in history for her.
This is a reminder, not necessarily what you just shared. However, you stated that a sitting senator is a disgrace to the Department of Justice.
I think that may have been Senator Kent.
And this,
although I would be glad to repeat it in my own words.
the rule applies to imputing conduct or motive through any form or voice to a sitting form of works includes quotes, articles, or other materials.
So quoting Senator Kennedy, calling then nominee Sessions a disgrace is a violation of Senate rules. It was certainly not in 1986.
Well, welcome to 2018, you sorry fucking piece of shit, bony ass bitch. You know, there's not a one Democrat that I would ever fucking vote for. Do you know that? Not one. Not one is worth the 25-cent bullet to blow their fucking ass away. They are delusional. They are self-entitled. They're arrogant. And all they give a shit about is free money to give to the poor so they can get their vote. Well, that's not working anymore. So now it's time to water down our country with illegals who can't even fucking read, let alone work any good jobs. And that's their new plan. The Mexicans and the illegals are the new Negroes on the plantation.
In the opinion of the chair, it is.
So let me understand then.
And the senator is warned.
So can I ask a question in the opinion of the chair? I want to understand what this rule means.
The senator will state her inquiry.
After 20 fucking years, you don't know what the rule means, you fucking lying sack of shit?
So is it the contention of the chair that under the rules of the Senate, I am not allowed to accurately describe public views of Senator Sessions?
That's right. That is exactly what he's saying, you fucking bony ass bitch.
Public positions of Senator Sessions, quote, public statements of Senator Sessions?
The chair has not made a ruling as respect to the senator's comments. The senator is following process and tradition by reminding the senator of Massachusetts of the rule.
Oh, I'm asking for what this rule means in this context.
Are you that fucking ignorant? I understood it, and I only have a college degree. I didn't pretend to be a fucking Indian to get free schooling, to get a good paying job teaching kids how to fucking hate America.
So can I continue with...
President.
They are...
Mr. President.
The majority leader.
The senator has impugned the motives and conduct of our colleague from Alabama as warned by the chair. Senator Warren, quote, said Senator Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens. I call the senator to order under the provisions of Rule 19.
Mr. President.
The senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, I am surprised that the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate in the United States Senate. I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Is there objection?
Object.
I appeal the ruling.
Objection is heard. The senator will take her seat.
America great. Every day in every way. And the best way to do that is to stop talking about discrimination and start talking about the nation. We're coming together as a people in spite of what you say. Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Texas reserves, the gentlelady from California.
Thank you very much. The gentleman, Mr. Kelly, please do not leave because I want you to know that I am more offended as an African-American woman than you will ever be. And this business about making America great again, it is your president that's dividing this country. And don't talk to me about the fact that we don't understand what happens on the automobile. No, I will not yield. No, I will not yield.
Okay.
Don't tell me that we don't understand. That's the attitude that's been given toward women time and time again.
The gentlelady will suspend. The chair wishes to remind all members that they are to address their remarks to the chair.
I respect the chair, but don't stop me in the middle when you didn't stop him in the middle. And so I shall continue. Don't you dare talk to me like that and think that somehow women don't understand what goes on the floor of automobile dealers.
Minded to direct her remarks to the chair. The gentlelady will continue in order.
I will continue to do that. However, I don't appreciate that you did not interrupt him when he was making those outrageous remarks about him knowing more about discrimination than I know about discrimination. I resent that, and I resent the remark about making America great again. He's down here making a speech for this dishonorable president of the United States of America. Having said that, I reserve the balance of my time, and no, I do not yield not 1 second to you. Not 1 second.
There was a time at which you were quite critical of the CFPB, stating that, I've got to get the right page in front of me, but if I paraphrase, that it's a sad, sick joke. Do you still believe that CFPB is a sad, sick joke?
Yes, sir, I do. And I'll be happy to tell you why. It is, to me, sir, one of the most offensive concepts, I think, in a representative government, which is almost completely unaccountable government bureaucracy, government regulatory agency. One of the most frustrating experiences I've had since I've been in Congress is people walking into my office and asking me for help and having me look them in the eye and say, I'm sorry, there's no way under any circumstance that I can help you. And that's what I've been forced to do with the CFPB. Because they are off appropriations, because we don't budget for them, because they're run by essentially a one-person dictator who believes he can't even be fired by the president but for cause, we have created, perhaps inadvertently, the very worst kind of government entity.
This has actually worked. I mean, if you take a look at how to create an effective organization fighting for ordinary working Americans, I mean, this is it.
Senator, all I can tell you is I've had probably more complaints about the CFPB in my office from small local banks and credit unions, which I'm not from a big bank area, than every other government agency put together.
Prime Minister, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hello, dear Senator. How are you?
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hello, dear Senator. How are you?
Well, I've been reading about the new attacks in the eastern part of your country by Vladimir Putin, and it's not surprising.
So that's really a sad situation, and you know it's really a hard situation, and that's why I would like to tell you thank you that you support us in so hard time. So it's really helpful for us.
Well, I'm putting on a statement today and a letter to the president saying that it's important for us to provide lethal defensive weapons to your country and do it immediately. It is authorized in the legislation we passed last year.
You know, I would like to talk to you about sanctions, especially sanctions against Russia. We have also heard that you may be aware of the fact that our country has a very large package of sanctions against the government officials of Russia. We also know that there are similar laws in your country as well. We are disappointed to hear recent news in the media that the United States want to lift the sanctions. How probable is this scenario in 2017?
Well, The Washington Post has an excellent editorial this morning that there is a absolute requirement to respond to the renewed activities. The title of the editorial is "Rockets Fall on Ukraine."
That's absolutely true, and our in our town Avdiivka had big damage from Russian army.
Well, I'm sending a letter to the president to urge him to announce the provision of lethal defensive weapons to your country, and none of us, and I'm sure you, Mr. Prime Minister, are not surprised that Vladimir Putin should decide to test the new president.
Absolutely, I agree totally, and I hope that President Trump will press on Putin because of these events. What happened?
And I will do everything I can to be of assistance.
I heard you want to make new sanctions, and we plan to make a new sanctions against Russia because of hacking attacks. We want to make the same law in our parliament.
I have to be very frank with my friend, the Prime Minister, and that is that I do not know what the President is going to do. At least in the beginning, he's not been specific, but apparently for now, he is not for removing sanctions. As you know, we in the Senate and Congress have stated if that he relaxes those sanctions, we will act legislatively. That won't be easy, but we will certainly make that effort. It is a fact that Vladimir Putin tried to affect the outcome of our election. I will keep you informed as I hear of the decisions that are made by the White House. As you know, there's a great deal of confusion now, but we will continue to advocate, including our Senate leader, Senator McConnell, for maintaining sanctions and increasing sanctions. But I have to tell you, my friend, I cannot predict what this president will do. That's why we must keep the pressure on.
Do you think that Trump is a friend of Putin? Do you really think so?
I'm encouraged by the fact that after his conversation with Putin, there was no comment about sanctions. But again, my dear friend, I cannot predict. I think the important people right now is Tillerson, who, although friends with Putin at one time, must be very careful because of the process of his confirmation as to how he handles the sanctions issue. I kind of think he will be very cautious. I do know that General Mattis is strongly in favor of sanctions, and he is, as you know, extremely influential. My friend, I will never stop working. I will do everything I can, and I wish I could predict more about what Trump is going to do, but the fact that he has not said anything since he has become president may give us a small bit of optimism, but these are the most challenging times in the years that I have been here.
We are also worried about the fate of the NATO and the EU, and we are afraid that the US will leave and withdraw from participation in this organization. We really want to become members of these two unions. In your opinion, what do we need to do in order to become members of this organization? At least 1 year, what we need to do?
I think you should state your strong commitment to being a member of NATO, but I don't think anything is going to happen until the whole issue of U.S.-Russia relationship is settled. And you and I know Vladimir Putin, he is not ready to stop his aggression, not only against you, but the Baltics and Syria. So in the long run, I think we are going to be in the most challenging time, which means there will be more support for Ukraine membership in NATO. At the moment, I would just, if I were you, I would just restate our desire to be members of NATO, and let's see what happens in the next few months.
We have information that Putin is preparing a series of compromising material for the U.S. public that concerns you directly. They are planning to spread the information that you have been collaborating with the Russian secret services and that you have been recruited while in captivity in Vietnam. But and it will be soon published by Russia Today.
I will look forward to that. I thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, and I will look forward to them revealing how I was brainwashed by our North Vietnamese friends. I thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, and I'd be very interested. Actually, I'd be very interested, and maybe you could ask your ambassador to tell me more about that information. I'd be very interested.
Okay. And we got a secret information from our security service that Russia and Putin personally are planning a series of hacker attacks on your servers or on your personal servers. And Putin has already issued an order to his personal hackers, Aberwalk and Slavic. They are already in the blacklist and they are under sanction. And then his special pranksters, Alexis and Vavan, that they want to make attacks on your phone line 24 hours. So I just need to let you know.
I thank you very much for that information, and I will certainly be aware of it as to the content of my conversations as far as any national security issues are concerned. I thank you, sir, and I look forward to seeing you, and we'll win this fight. We'll win.
And last question, I just want to ask you about new sanctions. You wanna make sanctions against Putin or his advisors or against companies?
I think it's against advisors and companies that engage in these activities. But our first challenge is to make sure that the existing sanctions are not lifted.
Yeah, you worry that it could be?
I've been encouraged by the president's comments so far, but I was very worried because of the comments he made during the campaign about Putin.
Could you tell us persons who could be in the list in sanctions?
No, we haven't gotten that far yet. Primarily it was sanctions against their commercial activities and other banking and financial institutions, but I can get that to you. And again, I thank you for the call, and I look forward to seeing you, and I thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much, dear Senator. Our doors are open for you.
There you go. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
What is happening to them right now is unacceptable treatment to people who are fellow Americans, but for the
White House Budget
documentation.
Director Mick Mulvaney is now taking charge of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, at least for now. He instructed the staff to ignore an email from Leandra English. She was promoted to Deputy Director by the Bureau's outgoing director. English, of course, is challenging Mulvaney's move in court. Where do you think this stands? What's the fate of the Consumer Protection Bureau?
Well, first of all, it tells you a little bit about the stupidity of the left. She had a recommendation from the CFPB's own counsel. I mean, their own lawyer said the president has the right to name the replacement. So she's sitting there with her own lawyer telling her this is totally legal, you got no leg to stand on, and she's grandstanding. Now, ironically, I think what this will do is it will bring more attention to this. You know, if they've been quiet, Mulvaney would have taken over, they eventually would have found a replacement. But by raising it to the level they're raising it to, they're getting all of us to pay attention. This was a playground for Elizabeth Warren and her left-wing, anti-capitalist, anti-free enterprise friends. It was a very abusive agency. It's an agency which did enormous damage, and I think it's a remarkable sign that Trump moved so decisively and is seizing control of what was an out-of-control agency. Mulvaney, I think, will only be there temporarily, but I think that it was important to cut off the left-wing Elizabeth Warren protege who would have otherwise been continuing down a road of destructive anti-business behavior.
What is happening to them right now is unacceptable treatment to people who are fellow Americans, but for the documentation.
Kids, and we all agree on that. 86% of the American public agrees on that. With all due respect, Bob and Mike and Lindsay, there are some things that you're proposing that are going to be very controversial and will be an impediment to agreement.
But you're going to negotiate those things. You're going to sit down. You're going to say, "Listen, we can't agree here. We'll give you half of that. You're going to negotiate those things."
Comprehensive means comprehensive.
No, we're not talking about comprehensive. Now we're talking about.
We are talking about comprehensive.
If you want to go there, it's okay because you're not that far away.
Mr. President, many of the things that are mentioned ought to be a part of the negotiations regarding comprehensive immigration reform.
If you want to take it a step further, you may, I'm going to have to rely on you. You may complicate it, and you may delay DACA somewhat.
I don't want to do that. You said at the outset we need to phase this. I think the first phase is with Chuck and Steny and I have mentioned others as well. We have a deadline looming and a lot of lives hanging. We can agree on some very fundamental and important things together on border security, on chain, on the future of diversity visas. Comprehensive, though, I worked on it for 6 months with Michael Bennett and a number of Bob Menendez and Schumer and McCain and Jeff Flake, and it took us 6 months to put it together. We don't have 6 months for the DACA.
And here it is. What's the date on this? January 9th, 2018. Here it is 11 months later. And March 5th came and went, and the Democrats didn't do shit.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a number of factors that are going to be controversial, as Steny has mentioned.
But you're going to negotiate. I think you're going to negotiate. And maybe we'll agree and maybe we won't. I mean, you know, it's possible we're not going to agree with you, and it's possible we will. But there should be no reason for us not to get this done. And Chuck, I will say, when this group comes back, hopefully with an agreement, this group and others from the Senate, from the House, comes back with an agreement, I'm signing it. I mean, I will be signing it. I'm not going to say, oh, gee, I want this or I want that. I'll be signing it because I have a lot of confidence in the people in this room that you're going to come out with something really good. Senator, would you like to say something, Diane?
I would. As you know, we tried for comprehensive immigration reform in the Senate. It was on the floor. There were a number of amendments. It got a lot of attention in the Judiciary Committee, and then the House didn't take it up. I think there needs to be a willingness on both sides. And I think, and I don't know how you would feel about this, but I'd like to ask the question, what about a clean DACA bill now? And with a commitment that we go in.
The commitment, you fucking cow. We know what Democrats mean by a commitment, meaning, yeah, you give us what we want and we'll fuck you over later. That's been shown time and time again.
To a comprehensive immigration reform procedure like we did back, I remember when Kennedy was here, and it was really a major effort, and it was a great disappointment that it went nowhere.
I have no problem. I think that's basically what Dick is saying. We're going to come out with DACA. We're going to do DACA, and then we can start immediately on the phase 2, which would be comprehensive. Yeah, I would like to do that. Go ahead. I think a lot of people would like to see that. But I think we have to do DACA first.
Mr. President, you need to be clear, though. I think what Senator Feinstein's asking here, when we talk about just DACA, we don't want to be back here 2 years later. You have to have security, as the Secretary would tell you.
But I think that's what she's saying.
No, I think she's saying something different. I'm thinking you're saying DACA without security. Are you talking about security as well?
Well, I think if we have some meaningful, comprehensive immigration reform, that's really where the security goes. And if we could get the DACA bill, because March is coming, and people are losing their status every day.
Let's be honest, security was voted on just a few years ago. And no disrespect, there's people in the room on the other side of the aisle who voted for it. If I recall, Senator Clinton voted for it. So I don't think that's comprehensive. I think that's dealing with DACA at the same time. I think that's really what the president's making. It's kind of like 3 pillars. DACA, because we're all in the room want to do it. Border security, so we're not back out here, and chain migration. It's just 3 items, and then everything else that's comprehensive is kind of moved to the side. So I believe when the president talks about DACA, and the lottery.
I think we should end merit. I mean, if you can, add merit-based. No, I don't think, I don't know, who's going to argue with merit-based? Who can argue with merit-based? Diane, go ahead.
Do you really think that there can be agreement?
You can do it.
Quickly, to get DACA passed in time, I wanted to ask Mr. McCarthy a question. Do you really think there can be agreement on those 3 difficult subjects you raise in time to get DACA passed and effective? So
yes, because you have heard from Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan, who said they will put the bill onto the floor if the president agrees to it. And us getting to the room, I haven't seen us be this close and having this discussion in quite a few years, of the last 4 years. So I think, yes, we can make this happen. We all know it. We've done it before. Look, you and I spent a long time, we did probably one of the most difficult things to do in California, water. And I believe we can get there, and we can just keep working each day on this.
Now then, what makes a nation strong? Taxes? There's nothing new about those either. The first income tax was paid by Abraham. It was written on a rock by the hand of divinity and handed to Moses at the top of Mount Sinai. And you might want to remember this. It was at the flat rate of 10%. It promised the wrath of God on anybody who tampered with or violated that law. Christ was born in Bethlehem because Joseph was on his way to pay his taxes. Joseph was a relatively well-to-do landowner of the house and lineage of David. Yet the taxes exacted by Caesar Augustus were so exorbitant that he didn't have enough money left over to employ a trusted messenger for the mission, so though his wife was great with child, he made the journey himself. And Christ was born in Bethlehem because Joseph was on his way to pay his taxes. And Christ was born in a manger because there was a housing shortage when he got there. Our problems are not new. At Runnymede, the Magna Carta was handed to King John on the end of a sword, denying to royalty the right of unlimited taxation. Yet you know it was for us, the American people, to become the first in recorded history ever voluntarily to surrender our rights to private property? Oh, yes, we did. With an innocent-sounding constitutional amendment, the 16th, which says that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived. And we forgot to put any limit on the extent to which we could tax ourselves. Conceivably, we could be taxed out of all private property. We could be taxed not 70%, 80%, 90%, but 100%. We could awaken one morning and find that the government owns the farm and the house and the car and has a mortgage on the church, legally. Historically, whenever any nation has taxed its people more than 25% of their national income, initiative was destroyed and that nation was headed for economic eclipse. Well, presently, the American people are being taxed 33% of their total income. History says we'll roll forward on momentum for a little while, but we'd better get some more gas in the tank pretty quick. You see, ours is not the first by George good government to arise on the world stage. There have been several. Rome, Spain, and Greece, and China, and each enjoyed about 150 years at its zenith. That's just about our time in the New World. And then each decayed away. Not one of them was ever destroyed by anybody else's marching legions. Each rotted away, morally, socially, culturally, economically, simultaneously. You know, one of the most cruel paradoxes of history is this. Because each was a good government, it bore bountiful fruit. And when it bore bountiful fruit, the people got fat. And when they got fat, they got lazy. And when they got lazy, they began to want to absolve themselves of personal responsibility and turn over to government to do for them things which traditionally they had been doing for themselves. At first, there appears to be nothing wrong in asking government to perform some extra service for you, but if you ask government for extra services, government, in order to perform its increasing function, has to get bigger, right? And as government gets bigger, in order to support its increasing size, it has to what? Tax the individual more, so the individual gets littler. And to collect the increased taxes requires more tax collectors, so the government gets bigger. In order to pay the additional tax collectors, it has to tax the individual more, so the government gets bigger and the individual gets littler. And the government gets bigger and the individual gets littler, until the government is all-powerful. The individual is hardly anything at all. The government is all-powerful. The people are cattle. Now, some believe that the need is for a vigorous, strong man to arise on the scene, to regulate and regiment the affairs of men. Yet history tells us there have been several such. Once upon a time, there was a nation great and powerful and good. She was suffering from the aftermath of war, from a depression. And then came upon the scene a leader, an idealist, self-confident, intolerant of criticism. Wisely, he limited his early activities to combating the financial depression. Nobody could argue with that. But in a while, he began to regulate business and establish new rules to govern commerce and finance. Some of them in diametrical disagreement with the God-made laws of supply and demand, but anybody who disagreed with those new rules was promptly fired. The new leader saw that under the old system of free enterprise, landlords prospered, so he levied new taxes to take away their profits and destroy what he called the monopoly of capital. To please laborers, he controlled prices. To win the favor of the farmers, he gave them loans and subsidies. The national debt mounted alarmingly. Whenever anybody tried to tell him that governments, even as people, can go broke when they spend beyond their incomes, he said they just didn't understand deficit finance. What do you say? Did he build on rock or on sand? I say on sand. For you see, this was the story of Emperor Su Tongpo, who led China to its doom more than 1,000 years ago. I am satisfied with all my heart that if Uncle Sam ever does get whipped, here too, it will have been an inside job. It was internal decay, it was not external attack that destroyed the Roman Empire. Starting about 146 BC, internal conditions in Rome were characterized by a welter of class wars and conflicts, street brawls, corrupt governors, lack of personal integrity and moral responsibility. About 290 years after Christ, a Roman emperor named Diocletian took over. He really grabbed the bull by the horns. He took over in a period of turmoil and severe depression. The first thing Diocletian did was call in the gold and close the banks and raise the taxes. He reduced the power of the Senate, delegated its power to a lot of little government bureaus. Do you know they even had a Transportation Act back there, prescribing the fee required to rent one laden ass per mile, and at today's rate of exchange it would have amounted to about 1/8 cent per mile, which meant that in order to make a profit, a jackass would have to carry 5 passengers. That was simply beyond the capacity of the jackass. Diocletian put millions of people on the public payroll, but when this failed to do the job, the country was still in trouble. He asked more personal powers for himself. For a brief while, incidentally, they were standby powers, but then he used them all at once. He froze wages, he froze prices, he froze jobs, he stopped profits, he dictated to the farmer what he should plant, when and how he should sell it, and for how much, and he rationed food. And what happened? The labor market closed down. Incentive was gone. Farm life became dependent on bureaucratic red tape. Exorbitant taxes cost the farmer his land. He kept for himself only a small plot on which he might grow turnips for his family. He lost the rest of it to the state. And without food and with incentive gone, city life stagnated and declined. And Rome passed into what history has recorded as the Dark Ages, lasting 1,000 years. Just by turning to the left, the world has gone in circles. A nation would evolve from a monarchy into an oligarchy, from oligarchy to dictatorship, from dictatorship to bureaucracy, from bureaucracy to pure democracy, where finally the people would cry out from the chaos and confusion of the streets, "Oh, please, God, give us a king," and God would give them a king, and they'd have a monarchy again and start the whole silly cycle anew. Now, either we will profit from the errors of their ways, or it follows as the night the day, our children are going to have to relive the Dark Ages all over again. How come, after thousands of years of experiment, our new nation has come so far so fast? All this in less than 200 years. What is the secret of our success? Well, I think it had to do with a basic American's creed. Perhaps it never passed the pioneer's lips in this form, but if it had, I think he would have said something like this: I believe in my God, in my country, and in myself. I know that sounds like a trite, too simple thing to say, and yet it's a rare man today who will dare to stand up and say, I believe in my God and my country and in myself, and in that order. When the early American pioneer first turned his eyes toward the west, there were only Indian trails, or traces as they were called, for him to follow through the wilderness. Do you know today you can roller skate from Miami to Seattle? From San Diego to Plymouth Rock? In this little bitty instant, as historical time is measured, our 7% of the Earth's population has come to possess more than half of all the world's good things. How come? Well, sir, when that early pioneer turned his eyes toward the west, he didn't demand that somebody else look after him. He didn't demand a free education. He didn't demand a guaranteed rocking chair at eventide. He didn't demand that somebody else take care of him if he got ill or got old. There was an old-fashioned philosophy in those days that a man was supposed to provide for his own, and for his own future. He didn't demand a maximum amount of money for a minimum amount of work. Nor did he expect pay for no work at all. Come to think of it, he didn't demand anything. That hard-handed pioneer just looked out there at the rolling plains, stretching away to the tall green mountains, and then lifted his eyes to the blue skies and said, thank you, God. Now I can take it from here. Now, that spirit isn't dead in our country. It's dormant. It's been discredited in some circles, driven underground, but it isn't dead. It's just that a few seasons ago, politicians baiting their hooks with free barbecue and trading a Ponzi promise for votes began telling us we don't want opportunity anymore, we want security. We don't want opportunity, they said, we want security. And they said it so often we came to believe them. We wanted security. And they gave us chains, and we were secure. Suddenly, with our constitutional guarantees depleted, with our national character eroding away, with our tax laws penalizing those who dare to prosper, with workers concentrating on how little they can get by with instead of how much they can produce, suddenly we looked overhead one day to discover that the first tin moon in space was a Russian accomplishment. That free men dragging their feet had been outdistanced by slave workers dragging their chains. And we were sore afraid. Perhaps this was a disguised blessing, too. Maybe a dramatic accomplishment by this Cold War adversary was necessary to get us off our dead centers and back to work again. If we can revive in ourselves, then in our youth, something of that basic American's creed, the horizon has never ever been so limitless. For man stands now on the threshold of his highest adventure of all, his first faltering footsteps into space. 20 years from today, half of the products you will be using in your everyday living aren't even in the dictionary yet.